Guys, welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. We're going to be joined today by Mark Morgan. Mark served as the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as well as the acting director of ICE. He's also a former FBI agent, a Marine veteran, and the border is getting even worse. We're seeing records day in and day out. At this point, it's an invasion, folks. If 10,000 Russians crossing the Ukrainian border is an invasion, millions at our border somehow magically isn't. At this point, it's just an open invitation from Biden to destroy our country. We understand exactly what they're trying to do, which is why there's no interest in the Democrats in actually solving the problem. So Mark's going to be the perfect guest to break it all down. So make sure you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing, so that you never miss one of these episodes. We're up against so much. We're combating the fake news. We're combating the mainstream media. We're combating big tech. And none of them are doing a single thing to get the real narrative out. So it's you guys that make all of that possible. So again, it's not that much to ask and it's not that hard. Just like right now. Share it, subscribe, download the Rumble app so we can actually fight back. You guys make that all possible. But before we get to Mark, I want to get to a quick rundown of the major headlines of the day. Because, candidly, the Democrats' election interference continues, and it's getting more and more obvious every single day. At this point, it's ridiculous, and we all see it. But honestly, that doesn't seem to matter anymore, which is really scary and should be scary to anyone who's been paying attention. My father was in court today in New York for the ridiculous civil case against him, myself, my brother, the Trump Organization, all put together by New York State Attorney General Letitia James. James campaigned on going after my father. That's how she propelled herself into the Attorney General's office. He was guilty before she'd ever seen any evidence, before she had any power to. She even said she was going to sue his ass off. This is exactly what you think it is, folks. Joe Biden is losing in the polls. So the Democrats are using every means possible to stop Trump. Letitia James is being assisted by the liberal judge assigned to this case. The judge, Arthur Engoron, made an absurd ruling last week in which he said that it's fraudulent to say that Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million because that's the price he put on it, even though there's experts that say it's worth up to 50, 60, 70, 80 times that. Engoron, by the way, is a lifelong Democrat donor, which should shock all of you folks. It should shock all of us at this point, that we'd have partisan judges choosing venues, picking the worst people, not allowing it to go to a commercial division where someone may actually understand something about how real estate works, little things like that. Here he is today, smiling for the cameras, folks. Check it out.
It's now being shown in the background. You've got Trump in the foreground, and it fulfills the narrative on both sides.
Yeah, guys, it's all a big joke. It's a joke to them. Molly Hemingway put it well in a tweet when she said, "The lengths Democrats are willing to go to destroy the republic and the rule of law over this seething and obsessive hatred of one man and his supporters is terrifying to contemplate." It's been a long day, folks. But she's right. It is. This is his 15 minutes. He's going to take down Trump. He can be the next Fauci that will be put on the cover of every liberal magazine across the country and made a hero. The rule of law be damned, folks. Meanwhile, Democrats are sounding the alarm. Not about their own corruption, because that's pretty obvious, and it seems that every time they go after Trump, it happens to be about 6 or 7 hours after major claims against Joe Biden and the most corrupt family in the history of U.S. politics. But they're literally now sounding fire alarms. New York Democrat Congressman Jamal Bowman pulled the fire alarm in a House office building on Saturday in what was an apparent attempt to delay a vote. This would be a crime, folks. specifically the crime of obstructing an official proceeding. You can't scream fire in a crowded theater. That's something the DOJ has charged 320 times in its January 6th investigation. It's also illegal to pull a firearm with malicious intent. So how is it that nothing seems to be happening to Bowman, and yet there are people that have been locked away for years without due process? If we did actually have some fairness under our rules, if we didn't in fact live in a two-tiered system of justice, each and every January 6th individual who committed a nonviolent offense would be released with an apology, with back compensation, or they'd put Bowman in jail for the same period of time. But I have a feeling neither of those things are going to happen. There's a picture of Bowman pulling the fire alarm, and he's admitted it was him. There's also been a wanted poster released of Bowman, and of course he hasn't been charged of any crimes. Why is that, folks? Well, Bowman is essentially pleading incompetence. He said he didn't know what he was doing, which does not surprise me. But it either means he's an imbecile and should not be representing anyone in Congress, or he's lying. Perhaps both. In all fairness, it's probably both. Okay? Bowman worked in a public school in New York for years. I imagine he knows what a fire alarm is. But the mainstream media, the press, and big tech, all of the same institutions that we are up against, folks, on a daily basis, will cover him. No, he pulled the fire alarm to open the door. Whatever excuse they can do. But a grandmother taking a selfie behind the velvet ropes in January 6th, harassed by our Justice Department and FBI for years, broken, that's all fine. Bowman said in a statement, "I am embarrassed to admit that I activated the fire alarm, mistakenly thinking that it would open the door. I regret this and sincerely apologize for any confusion this caused." No. He's sorry that he got caught. Didn't matter, it can try to delay it. This is all clearly a lie. Bowman, as I said, is a former school principal, which means he had to do fire drills on more than one occasion. He knows exactly what a fire alarm looks like and what happens when you pull it. There's nothing confusing about a bright red box that says fire. But what's worse? If Bowman is lying or telling the truth, that he doesn't know that pulling an alarm would trigger a fire alarm. I mean, pulling a fire alarm, I had no idea, folks, that it would trigger, a fire alarm. Maybe, honestly, guys, maybe it's best to actually believe Congressman Bowman. Do the Democrats really have a congressman or senators that can't speak up, that can't read? I mean, based on some of the legislation they pass, based on some of the things that come out of, AOC's mouth, it would not actually surprise me, but I do believe the American people deserve better. Do we believe Jamal Bowman? He's just too stupid to understand a fire alarm starts a fire alarm? You can't make it up anymore, folks. But again, because they'll get away with it, nothing's ever going to change. Again, same rules apply to the January 6 people. Nonviolent offenders in jail for years, broken, legal battles destroying their financial well-being. And meanwhile, one of the newest Democrats in Congress isn't elected and probably wasn't picked for her merits. This should not surprise anyone, but California Governor Gavin Newsom announced Monday that he will be appointing liberal activist and labor organizer LaFonza Butler to fill California's vacant Senate seat. He made the promise a while ago that he was going to appoint an African-American woman if that happens. Remarkable thing, though, is that Butler doesn't even live in California. She lives in Maryland, as on her registrations. So she has to register in California. This is like the most Democrat thing ever, right? It's not like there's not, 43 million people in California? I mean, how many of them are women of color that could have been chosen? But no. We have to find a Beltway Democrat, the most radical of the radical that doesn't even live in California, because one of those 43 million actual Californians clearly cannot represent the extreme positions of today's radical left, as well as a Beltway pundit. It's not like there's a shortage, folks. But on the bright side, at least Adam Schiff didn't get the job. Adam Bull Schiff, as many of you refer to him, or Adam Full of Schiff, congressman who's been salivating over that seat for years, he's not going to get it now because of her. And honestly, because of how bad he is, because of how willing he was able to break the laws of our country and weaponize his position as the head of the Intel Committee of the House, I almost don't care how bad she is if it stops him from getting the power that he wants. And guys, speaking of power, Joe Biden did an interview this weekend in which he complained that the government can't censor information on the internet. Watch for yourself.
What about what Elon Musk has done to Twitter, lowering guardrails against misinformation? Does that contribute to it?
Yeah, it does. Look, one of the things, as I said to you, when I thought I wasn't going to run, I was going to write a book about the changes taking place. And most of it's directed over the years for these fundamental changes in society by changing technology. Mm-hmm. Gutenberg printing in the printing press changed the way Europeans could talk to one another, all the way to today. Where do people get their news? They go on the internet. They go online. They go, and you have no notion whether it's true or not.
Wow. Biden's upset that we know that the border is completely opened, that there's a crisis in humanitarian proportions down there that we've never seen before. He's upset about that we have basic information that anyone with a brain can compute. We have the latest footage from the border. We're going to get into all of that coming up with Mark Morgan. So make sure, again, folks, that you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing to the content. That's how we're going to get the message out. That's going to combat everything that we're up against. If you think that Joe Biden just saying that he's upset that they can't censor as much doesn't mean it's not still happening in big tech, in the mainstream media, even in conservative media, you guys haven't been paying attention. So make sure that we get it out there, because it's because of you guys that make all of this possible, along with our incredible sponsors. So guys, while we're at it, make sure to check out the great folks over at Goldco. Interest rates are rising. Of course, we're still seeing the inflation, the reckless spending, the global turmoil, the never-ending dollars to Ukraine. They're mortgaging your family's future, your children's well-being each and every day. And it's only leading to more economic anxiety. So I want you all to be prepared, and owning tangible, physical, inflation hedging gold and silver can help secure and stabilize your portfolio. Goldco has top-notch customer service. They'll answer your questions. They'll walk you through the whole process step by step so you can learn for yourself. So go to donjuniorgold.com. That's DONJR gold.com to learn more and to educate yourself about what's going on. That's DONJRgold.com. And before you call over there or look it up online, don't forget to check out the great folks at Patriot Mobile, America's only Christian conservative wireless phone provider. I keep saying it, we need to support the companies who support us back. It takes guts to support a show like this. That alone should have you guys looking at these sponsors relative to their competition, right? You've seen the attempts at canceling sponsors right here on Rumble. Last week, it's going on. But I have a feeling, folks, you're gonna have a cell phone. So have a cell phone with Patriot Mobile, where you're putting America first with every call while getting the same nationwide coverage as the major carriers. Patriot Mobile provides you dependable wireless service at an affordable price, putting your dollars into action and supporting freedom-loving values. They donate a portion of every dollar to support groups that fight for the First Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, the sanctity of life, and protecting our brave police and first responders. So for free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/triggered. It's fast, it's easy, and it's free. patriotmobile.com/triggered. Check them out, vote with your wallet, and support them. patriotmobile.com/triggered. Okay, guys, as promised, joining me now, former Border Patrol Chief Mark Morgan. Mark's been on the front lines. He knows it well. He's been in charge of ICE. He has done this. And tell me, have you ever seen anything like this? I mean, this isn't even like, it's just a little bit worse than the worst. I mean, this is an all-time worst, isn't it?
It's the worst in our nation's history, Don, hands down. And I think what's so frustrating for me is I worked for your father as the president. And this has nothing to do whether I like him personally or not. That's not it. The facts are the facts. And those facts showed us that he provided us a network of tools, authorities, and policies that actually allowed us to do our job, to enforce the rule of law, secure our border, and protect our nation against a vast set of complex threats coming across our shared border with Mexico. And what did the Biden administration do? On day one, they dismantled that entire network, and they took the most secure border in our lifetime, and they intentionally unsecured. And that's why I'm damn mad. This is ridiculous. Every aspect of our nation's health, safety, and national security is being negatively impacted, and this administration continues to lie to the American people about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what's most frustrating. It's not like there's not a solution, right? It's not like it's impossible. This is an insurmountable goal. I mean, we did it. It's sort of like when they were like, oh, we can't really take out ISIS. So my father goes in to the Middle East. He says, hey, operators, like SEAL teams, do what you need to do. You have the authority to do what you got to do. Not some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. or some lawyer. Like, you go do what you do best, which is like killing terrorists. And within 2 weeks, they basically took down the caliphate. Like, it's not rocket science, is it? I mean, everything we need to actually do something, everything we need to shut it down is at our disposal, is it not?
I couldn't have said it better myself. You're absolutely correct. And I've echoed what you said. You don't have to be a border security expert to get it. It's common sense. Let's just start by some basic principles. First, enforce the laws that are on our books. Two,
Mark,
right?
Don't talk crazy now. Don't talk crazy. I mean, this is Democrat power players we're talking about. I mean, the laws only get enforced and weaponized against their enemies.
That's exactly right. So the common sense approach. And then the other thing is how about we have a president, how about we have a team of people that actually goes to the border and listens to the experts? That's one of the many aspects of your father that he gained my respect and trust, because he wasn't just another political blowhard. He actually went to the epicenter of the crisis. He actually stood on the front lines of our nation's border and talked to the experts. And he asked them, what do you need? What can I do to help you solve this crisis? And not only did they tell him, but he listened and then he actioned it. And part of that was a multi-layer strategy of deterring people from thinking about violating the law and applying consequences to those that do. And then he actually gave them the resources to actually help them do their job of deterrence and consequences. It's not complicated. And that's why by February of 2020, we had reduced illegal immigration by over 85%. That put more resources, more Border Patrol agents on the front lines to do their law enforcement mission and their national security mission to protect this country.
Yeah, no, I mean, we hit a record in September. Authorities caught 260,000. I mean, it's over 250,000 people just in September. Illegal immigrants on the southern border. That doesn't include how many we missed. That doesn't include the drugs, fentanyl, human trafficking, child sex trafficking that's running rampant there. I know it was incredibly controversial when Trump said, that rapists were coming across the border, but of course they are. And now that's probably happening in droves. The previous record was in December of last year. These are just illegal immigrants. So we talked about how many are we missing? Because I have a feeling like we're catching the ones that are the least sophisticated, the least violent, the least brutal, the ones with the least amount of resources to actually cause true havoc in our country. And, I think that's a big component that no one's talking about.
Yeah, Don, look, this is why I love coming on the show and talking with you. You're spot on. I know this well. I couldn't have said it better myself. Here's one of the things we don't talk. First of all, there's a couple of important things. And this is where what I say that our nation's compassion has been hijacked, as if illegal immigration. The key is illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. That's a lie. It's both a cause and effect. And what happens is illegal immigration, when they come across, you're right, the majority literally will sit down and wait in 115-degree temperature for Border Patrol agents to come to process them. Why? Because they know they're going to be processed and released into the interior United States, never heard from again. But when you have, in the last 32 months, 7.4 million total nationwide encounters, you're literally pulling resources off the front line away from their national security mission. They're relegated to administrative duties processing illegal aliens, which, by the way, not only did they commit a crime to illegal entry, but they're also filing false asylum claims because they're not fleeing persecution. They're economic migrants. Just want to throw that out there. But literally, there's no Border Patrol agents on our front line. We've literally handed operation control over to the cartels for them to exploit. And that's where, to hit your point, that's where we have the gotaways. And think about it. Go back to common sense. Why do we have a gotaway? If you come across your process and release, why are you trying to escape? Well, common sense will tell you, because in that demographic, that's where the murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members are. Every single day, 1.6 million known gotaways. There are about a dozen states, Don, in our country whose population is below 1.6 million. We've literally added a 51st state equivalent of gotaways, of murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. Your father, every time that he said that, he was factually correct. And the left media attacked him for it. And I would get so frustrated because he was the one actually speaking the truth.
Yeah. Well, it's not even like they're not even enforcing the laws that are on the books. They're actively, seemingly promoting this notion that, hey, if you get in here, you're going to get all the freebies. It's not like, oh, the border's just porous. They're creating the incentives for people to actually come. And it doesn't surprise me that there seems to be a different treatment. Actual political refugees from Cuba or Venezuela, people who are being shot in the streets of Havana last year, they were turned away because they're actually fleeing the Marxist utopia that the Democrats are trying to prevent. You said it best, sort of the economic migrants. They're not actually fleeing persecution. Sure, they want a free check in this. That's permanent Democrat voting base. They don't have the education, the ability to probably ever contribute back to the system, so they'll take a lot more out of it. You, the American taxpayer, has the privilege of paying for that. Our resources, our public school system's already a disaster between the indoctrination and the bullshit. Our medical system's stressed to the hilt. Our infrastructure, basically across the board. And no one's even talking about that. The Democrats that are doing this, they're shooting themselves in the foot. The least affluent neighborhoods are going to be affected by this even more than any other because there is still a finite number of resources being spread around. But you're right, there's a 51st state, in many cases, quite a large 51st state based on the 7.2 million that have come across. That's 7 times the size of Montana's population. And we're going to have to take care of that one way or the other.
Yeah, Don, you're right. Look, you're talking about the direct effects of illegal immigration. I'll foot stomp that, and I'll go back. And this is why I say illegal immigration is both an effect that you just described, but it's also the cause of our borders being open, right? Because, again, it pulls resources away. They're not on the front line. And then the cartels, that's how they exploit it. And that's when drugs, criminals, national security threats are coming across. I always say, look, these images we see in New York, that's great. And I understand why we're doing that. But I try to tell people, if you see, think about this, all those illegal aliens that you see in New York lying in the street, and they're laying on the sidewalks trying to find a place to live, just imagine every 10 illegal aliens that you see sitting in New York, think about the hundreds of pounds of drugs that also came in right alongside them and made their way to every town, city, and state in this country, or the criminals. I'll give you one real quick stat. In the past 32 months, Border Patrol mainly have apprehended 146 convicted murderers. Think about it. Let that sink in. They've apprehended 146 convicted murderers. Now think about how many murderers are among the 1.6 million known gotaways. I can give you one in recent history, the Pennsylvania fugitive. He fled Brazil because he had killed somebody in Brazil, and to avoid apprehension, he illegally entered the United States and then killed again. That is happening on a regular basis in this country.
Talk about, let's go further on that, because you also see, hey, there's, we've never seen this level of, Chinese nationals coming across, that no doubt that many of them are likely linked to the CCP and the Communist Party. Other countries, it's not like, oh, it's Mexico coming across or Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras coming across. And talk about that threat, because that seems like a big one, especially when you couple that with like the videos that you see on mainstream media, if they even show you something, it's like a mother and child, but they're not showing you the videos of like boatloads of like fighting age men. They're not fleeing political persecution. If you do that, you bring your family, you bring your kid, not like, young 20-year-old men coming over here. Like I have a feeling they have different intentions than, perhaps a mother that is actually fleeing. It's probably more economic hardship than anything, but, at least you say, okay, fine, maybe there's something there.
That's the point, Don. You're again, the issue is we don't know. Why would we speculate in differential treatment and speculation in their favor and not in the favor of our national security? Every point you just brought up, thousands of Chinese nationals. Why? That's a fair, rational, reasonable question that we should be asking. What is the intent? Why are we seeing this? In the past 32 months, Border Patrol has apprehended illegal aliens from 170 different countries. 170. There's only 195 recognized countries in the world. And many of those countries we know either harbor terrorists or facilitate terrorist financing. And we also know that in the past 32 months, Border Patrol alone has apprehended illegal aliens trying to sneak into our border over 256 times in the last 32 months. To put that in perspective, that last year under the Trump administration, that number, 6. I mean, this is unconscionable. And I say that, and this is not hyperbolic, and I will not back down from this comment, that it is potential. Again, go back to the 1.6 million known gotaways, that we could have a sleeper terror cell in our country right now.
We could have dozens.
We have no idea.
We could have dozens. It's not like
dozens.
one. I mean, I'm at this point just playing statistics. When you talk about those countries, yeah, after about the first 30, 35, they're probably not the greatest places in the world to probably want people coming in from. Just off the top of my head, I'll get criticized for stereotyping, but give me a break, okay? It seems like not only is there a chance, but it's almost would be an impossibility to not have numerous terrorists. I mean, they see that again, but those are the ones that are sophisticated enough. The people that took down the World Trade Center, the people that orchestrate these bombings at our embassies around the world, that, these are not, they may live in caves, but they live in caves for a purpose, to keep them off the grid. That I imagine they can get across a Swiss cheese border far better than someone who's actually, just fleeing, economic disparity with their children.
That's exactly right. And this is, again, why we say border security is synonymous with national security. Let me give you a look. 18 months ago, the FBI thwarted a terrorist attack that was designed to assassinate former President Bush. And how are they going to carry that out? By sneaking across terrorists through our wide open southwest border. Yet, how much did we hear about that? How much of the mainstream liberal media covered that? Zero. It wasn't even a blip on the radar. Don.
Yeah, and he's a rhino. You'd think they'd give him a little bit of credit, but but honestly, I didn't know that. Now, I traveled a little bit in August, but I do this for a living. I mean, think about that. A terrorist cell ready to assassinate a former president. I wonder who else would be in their crosshairs, but how is that possible that that's not common knowledge? How is that not the biggest story of the day? Every time there's a Trump indictment, it's covered, it's conveniently 12 hours after Joe Biden gets caught doing something else so that they don't have to cover that. So I guess it shouldn't surprise us, but that's a really big deal.
It is a big deal, but again, I think I'm with you. It doesn't surprise me because it doesn't fit into their narrative. And we have to be honest here. And look, I've been a career guy most of my life, but I'm gonna continue to call balls and strikes. The liberal mainstream media is obviously an extension of the Democratic Party. There's no mistaking that right now, Don. We know that. That's obvious. If you say otherwise, you're just not being intellectually honest. So they basically buried the story. They buried it when the FBI director says again and again under oath in congressional testimony that our southwest border poses a serious national security and criminal threat to our country. They refuse to tell us openly the number of 1.6 million known gotaways. They will not tell us the disposition of all the illegal aliens that they've encountered on the terror screening database. The Secretary of Homeland Security won't even respond to requests from Congress as part of their their constitutional oversight responsibilities. And the last thing that I'll say that we don't talk enough about either, this administration hides, is the death and suffering at the hands of the migrants because of their open borders. They've told the entire world, risk your life, work with the cartels to come to our borders because we're going to let you in. And the last 32 months, CBP alone has recovered almost 2,000 dead migrants. We know that 30% of young women and children are sexually assaulted or raped in the journey up here, and countless are thrust into life of trafficking. But you never hear this administration or the liberal media talk about that, Don.
Yeah, listen, as you know, with my hobbies, it sort of takes me down to South Texas a lot. You know, hunting season, I have a lot of friends down there, ranches near the border, and honestly, even ranches 100 miles over the border. You know, they're not going through the highway system, the ones they're sneaking in, but the amount of stories I see, and it's not just, you know, here's a picture of, you know, people's backpacks and trash left down there, but the amount of, we found it, you know, a dead woman and child, we found it, like, it's dozens, and that this isn't known by the American people, that, you know, the humanitarian crisis isn't just, it's literally the people dying and starving or of thirst or heat exposure or,
right,
you know, coming across the border. Those are actually, the people that are dying from it are probably the ones that you actually want to be helping, right? Not the drug traffickers that are getting fined in there, they're getting paid, people's life, you know, that aspect of this crisis is not even spoken about. Is truly, I mean, I guess nothing shocks me anymore, but it's truly sick.
It is. I just got video footage from the elite Texas DPS aircraft division where they had spotted a young woman that was sitting in the middle of a desert area by herself. And they went and responded, and they realized that she had twisted her ankle. And so what do you think the cartels did, Don? You think they gave her emergency aid and got a litter? Of course not. They left her there. They left her there because she couldn't keep up to die. And that happens on a regular basis. But you're never going to hear that from the liberal mainstream media or this administration. But that's the kind of atrocities that's happening every single day.
Yeah, I have a friend, John Rourke, a veteran. He runs Blue Line Moving, a moving company there. And he literally takes his trucks and he goes and does a cleanup on the border there every couple of months. And I mean, you know, hundreds of tons. I mean, they're doing in like a weekend cleanup in some of these, hundreds of tons of garbage and clothes. It's, you know, that's not from the people that are living there. That hundreds of tons? Like, I mean, I don't think we can even fathom the volume that's coming across the border. But I want to ask you, Mark, there's a video going around right now of a Border Patrol agent fist bumping an illegal immigrant. The illegal immigrant is fist bumping the agent after the agent is literally cutting razor wire on the border that Texas put there. I mean, I know a lot of guys in Border Patrol. I have a lot of respect for these guys. I think most of them actually think like me, not the bureaucrats at the top. There's a difference, and we always have to make that distinction. But can you lay out how border agents are now instructed to interact with this? I mean, honestly, like you have an easier time coming across that border than you do getting basic rights in America as a citizen.
Yeah, that's actually factually correct what you just said. And think about it, the images that we had in Eagle Pass that we saw with the thousands and thousands sitting under that bridge, here's what's even more infuriating. That bridge above them, about 30 feet above them, is actually the legal point of entry, which is where they should be going through. I mean, the irony is palpable there. But look, it's very important because, Don, you and I share, obviously, I was chief of the Border Patrol and then commissioner of CBP. So I as well have immense respect for the men and women in Border Patrol, as I know you do and your father does, right? And even seeing them cut that razor wire, that hasn't wavered for me. Here's why. Because they are put in an untenable position and a no-win situation. The lawlessness at the border that's happening right now, when we talk about blame, there's only one person to blame, and he sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The second person to blame is his chief architect of his open border policy, Secretary Mayorkas. They're the ones calling the shots. They're the ones directing the Border Patrol agents what to do and how to do it. And I talk to them on a regular basis, and I can tell you, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're at their wits' end, and their morale is the worst it's ever been.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have to be. I remember the guy on the horse. He was whipping illegal, and it was like, no, he wasn't. Well, it didn't matter. It didn't stop them from going after him. He doesn't get an apology. They run with a narrative based on a false picture. Everyone there, it's sort of like what we do with the New York. Well, there's sworn testimony. None of that matters. We got a narrative, and we will do whatever we can to fulfill it. So, I'll play the video right now just for the people who are watching who may not have seen it. You guys have that one up? All right, let's play it because, it just sort of surprised me given, again, the way that these guys were treated.
Gracias. 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 Agradecido con el país.
Soy periodista. No.
Okay.
So, there's that. So I get what you're saying. And like I said, I've been down there. I've been to the border. I know so many of these guys. The guys that come up to me, hey, man, these guys are worried going in daily. They couldn't believe how well they had it under Trump. They were able to, and there's still risk, obviously. That's a dangerous place. But now, they're literally overrun. So when I saw that video, it was like, man, what is going on? That illegal immigrant gets a fist bump, and there are veterans. I saw the video of that 95-year-old Korean War veteran. I had it on the show last week. Thrown out of New York State housing to make room for illegals. So if you're coming across the border illegally, like getting a fist bump from Border Patrol, while a veteran who served his country patriotically is 95 years old, presumably has been paying taxes and Social Security for all of the benefits that he now get, but Korean War veteran, he's getting thrown out on his ass while these guys are getting fist bumped. I mean, we talk about two-tiered system of justice. It's not just in the legal system anymore. It's now how you're treated. I mean, for the Democrats, if you're an American citizen, you're like a distant second, probably third or fourth class citizen relative to people who have never paid into a system, are here illegally. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I don't know when the American populace is like, enough is enough, but like, hey, guess what? I get it. I'm the son of a billionaire from New York. I'll be fine. Like, what about the people in these areas? What about the, lower income demographics in our country? They're the ones that are going to get displaced. They're the ones that are going to lose their jobs. They're the ones that, other people that are willing to work for a lot less and for cash who aren't paying into those systems, they're the ones that are going to get screwed. And yet, that's a big portion of the Democrat base. And it's fine. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, look, Don, I think this is why, part of the reason why I get so angry and I get so frustrated as well, what you just outlined. And I think that's why you're seeing this movement across this country. I actually have called it awakening in the past 32 months of what's happening, everything you just said. I think everybody, a lot of people are waking up and sharing that same frustration. I mean, look, just on this basic premise, these individuals are violating the rule of law, forsaking the boundaries of a foreign sovereign nation. And if that's not enough, then they're coming in and they're lying on their asylum application because they are economic migrants. And what do? There are zero consequences. Zero. Nothing happens to them. It's even worse. They actually get rewarded, right? As soon as they come across, they violated the law, they file a fraudulent application. Those are both criminal offenses, right? Where they should be being prosecuted. But instead, because the end justifies the means, they say, nope, we're going to reward you. We're going to fly you and transport you anywhere in the United States you want to go. Yeah. And we're going to give you the equivalent benefits that we would give to a citizen. And meanwhile, that's driving our borders to be open for drugs, criminals, and national security threats to pour in.
Yeah, I have a friend, a Secret Service agent. I won't disclose names or where he's from. I mean, literally texting me over the weekend, hey man, have you noticed where you are that the airports, now he lives in a border state, right? And, he goes, the airports are full of illegals and I'm seeing them there. They got their, government IDs and they're literally, he's like, people getting thrown off flights so they can send them and spread them around the country. I mean, that's the other part. You read about this, the midnight or 2 a.m. flights. Oh, no, it's an early morning flight. Yeah, there's a lot of flights, commercial flights that land between 2 and 4 a.m. I mean, they're flying these people around the country. I think my father talked, I think it was this weekend. I got to find that clip. But, it's amazing. You see all these young fighting age men, and they all have a brand new, beautiful cell phone. it's obviously a setup. I mean, someone's orchestrating all of this. It isn't just us rolling out the red carpet and creating an incentive system. I mean, it feels so much more nefarious than that. How is it that someone fleeing economic asylum, they're so destitute, yet they have a beautiful iPhone? It's amazing to really think about, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the multi-layered big lies and false narratives being told, right? Is that these individuals that are fleeing, first of all, we're being told they're asylum seekers, right? They're fleeing state-sponsored persecution. That's just not right. It's a lie. And the historic data shows it, that anywhere between 85 to 90% do not get relief from the courts because they're filing false asylum claims. And then, as you said, look, many of these individuals have actually been in other countries for some time. I'll give you just one example that illustrates this. So we know Venezuela right now, if you're born in Venezuela, that's your automatic Willy Wonka ticket factory in the United States, and then they've given them temporary protected status free from deportation. Here's the issue. Many of these Venezuelans have not lived in Venezuela for a decade or more. They've been living in Brazil or other safe third countries where they've been doing just fine. But this administration now says, hey, it doesn't matter. Come on in. They're violating it and exploiting it every single day. This administration knows it. They're lying to the American people, and they know that it causes our border to be unsecured. They don't give a damn, because at the end of the day, they see a perceived political benefit. They know that illegal aliens are counted as part of the census, which is a redistricting of the House seats in their favor. And they believe every single illegal alien they find a pathway to citizenship is going to equate to a Democratic vote. Remember, then candidate Biden, remember what he said? If you don't vote for me, you're not black. They're going to say the same thing about every single illegal alien that they've converted to be a citizen.
Yeah. I mean, so many of the illegal immigrants are coming in that, like, now, even like New York's like insane radical liberal governor is saying that we need to seal up the border. But to your point, Mayor Adams, who, countless videos of him promoting, sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities are great if they're not coming to your sanctuary city. Like, we can be a sanctuary city in name only, so it sounds really good and we can virtue signal and get the credit with the liberals. But now that they're actually there, even they are saying, we got to stop this stuff. Enough is enough. But does that matter? Because it feels like, it's a small price to pay for the Democrats to have power forever, to your last point. They're trying, I said this on the show, they're trying to stack the census. Whether you're here legally or not, if you're there, you get counted. We can flush the cities with Democrat voters. We can take over all of Congress. There will never be an opposition party that could ever actually move any needles. And it seems like they're willing to destroy their own states to get that. Because, again, the most radical of the radicals are now actually fed up once they see that they're not immune from it themselves.
Yeah, keep in mind. So I agree. The virtual signal is exactly right, and I think Americans are seeing right through, mayors like Adams of sanctuary cities. But let's keep in mind they're still playing both sides, because Eric Adams, he still hasn't come out and correct. I mean, just 100% opposition to Joe Biden and calling him out. What they're really doing is, hey, give us more U.S. taxpayer funding. Rather than take that funding to stop the crisis, secure our borders, they're just asking for more money to manage the crisis after it's already here. It's the same thing with the governor. They're not really putting forth any serious proposals or mandates on the Biden administration to reverse course on their open border policies. They're just asking for more money, and it's working. I mean, part of that is what led to the temporary protected status for Venezuelans, to hurry up and expedite that process of getting them jobs. They're trying to cover up and mask the crisis rather than actually address and stop it.
Yeah. So you were in the Trump administration when the wall was being built.
Yep.
Can you tell us about the wall construction, how it worked, and what exactly is going on with all of this other material that's just sitting there, bought and paid for by the U.S. taxpayer? I mean, because to me, that one's pretty incredible. But even I don't know all the details. But I think the people who ultimately paid for that should, especially when it's a big talking point in the Republican primary. Well, it didn't get built, nothing, yada, yada, yada. It's like, well, they built hundreds of miles, but like minor details. We were up against even Rhino Republicans like Paul Ryan preventing these things from happening. Can you talk about the details of all of that? Because I think it's really important for people to understand.
It is. So let's talk about the first goal that was set. The first goal that was set by this first term of President Trump, he wanted to build 450 miles of wall system. And the system part is very important because it's much more than just steel and concrete going in the ground. Every single mile of wall system included state-of-the-art technology, lighting, and access roads that not only allowed the Border Patrol to more effectively respond and prevent threats from coming across, but also help them to do that in a safe and effective manner. So that's why it's a wall system. The second thing is, Chris Christie, I have to mention this. I saw the last debate where he said that President Trump, that we built 52 miles. I'm telling you, Don, it's just a blatant lie. It's an ignorant statement and shows the complete lack of knowledge that he has. At the end of the day, because I stood on the southwest border with your father the day that we celebrated 450 miles of wall system being built. I was there. I actually have a plaque that your father signed, and it's on my wall in my office. And we continue to build. I think at the end, we actually.
But even conservative media took that. Even conservative media took that as the way to hit Trump. Oh, Chris Christie said this as though it was the gospel. I mean, it can be a flagrant lie. It can be off, but what difference does it make? I mean, and I think that shows us even where you stand with sort of the uniparty, right? That conservative media takes a fact that it's just so flagrantly false, such a lie, and they promote it and they push it out there. There's no fact check. There's no this. It sort of tells us where we need to be, which is also tells us where perhaps the Republican Party is and why we need someone who's not just the Republican candidate, because maybe they'd be just as bad as any Democrat in folding to the nonsense.
Yeah, look, and the reason, I'll give you one example. So we had, the old World War II, Normandy-style X barriers that you saw on the beaches. Well, that's what we had in some areas of the border. They were useless. Yeah, exactly. They were useless. I mean, people could walk over them. The cartels actually designed ramps where they could actually put ramps over them, drive cars over them. It was stupid. So we got rid of those and put the new 30-foot wall system in there, again, with state-of-the-art technology, lighting, anti-climb plates, the whole 9 yards. And I remember when I was commissioner, I was asked about that. They said, well, isn't that replacement? And I said, let me ask you this. If you buy a new car, let's say you got rid of your 1980 Pinto and you bought a Mercedes-Benz, and your buddies ask you, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Do you tell them you bought a replacement car? Of course not. You say you bought a brand new car because it was better and new in every imaginable way. It's the same thing with the 462 miles of wall system that we built under the President Trump administration.
Yeah, and when people criticize some of that, I think the other thing the border is X number of miles longer. I'm like, there are areas that are virtually impossible. You don't actually need to spend millions of dollars or whatever it is per mile to build a wall because, no one's crossing the Grand Canyon, so to speak, right? There are geographical things that make it impossible. Unless you're, the guy from Free Solo, you're not climbing, a 400-foot brick wall, or there's parts of the desert where there's no other roads, but also, even if it isn't a wall, by putting walls in the areas where there is a high concentration, if you drive the worst there, it's easier to cover because you can see the concentration. And that people neglect all of the obvious talking points as it relates to all of this. It's you don't need to build a thousands of mile long wall, but if you do these things in strategic areas, you either drive people to concentrated points that Border Patrol can actually then focus on and work on, or you put them in a place where there's no way they could feasibly do it themselves. So there's no reason to actually spend millions of dollars putting up a wall in an area where there's, whatever it is, a geographic thing that makes it impossible to cross, et cetera.
Yeah, Don, that's absolutely correct. And look, when I'm sitting here listening, I'm thinking to myself, you're an example, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, you're an example that represents someone that has actually been to the border and actually talked to the experts and actually listen to them. And I can tell, talking to somebody for 5 minutes, that they've been to the border and spent quality time there and quality time with Border Patrol agents. Because you're right. To foot stomp, let me give you just one sector of the 9 sectors of the southwest border, the Ben Big sector, right? You're not going to need a wall through most of that sector. I mean, that terrain is inhospitable. It's almost impossible. What you would need, though, is that the ability to have persistent surveillance, as you said, to be able to identify and track those that are trying to get through because they can't through other areas, and the Border Patrol is going to be able to respond and apprehend them. It's not complicated. It's a straightforward strategy and process.
Mark, what steps would you take to first secure the border? I mean, if you got back control 2024, DJT gives you the call, be like, get to work. What do you do?
Yeah. The first thing I do is I'd walk to the cupboard and pull off President Trump's border security strategy book, dust it off, and implement it. And I'm not being facetious here, and I'll give you some quick examples. Number one on my list would be to reinstate the Remain in Mexico program. Number two, I would reinstate the asylum cooperative agreements we had with all three Northern Triangle countries. Number three, I would reinstate the construction of the border wall. Number four, I would actually remove the restrictions that Secretary Mayorkas has placed on ICE to actually allow them to do their job and to apprehend and deport those that are here in the country illegally. Those are just four off the top of my head right now. If you do just those four, Don, you will see illegal immigration drastically drop overnight.
Okay, so this is the harder question, Mark. But you also have a background in federal law enforcement, and you're in the FBI and all this, so you understand how these agencies work. What do you do about the 7 million people that came here?
Yeah, so I get asked that all the time. And look, I'm not trying to be flip here, but this is what I would say. We start with one at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, right? We make it a priority. We actually enforce the law. We actually unclip the wings of ICE. We get together a joint interagency strategy to actually go and remove those that are here in the country illegally. But here's what I'll tell you, because you have to do both. If you only do one or the other, they're not going to continue to stop coming, because we saw that in 1986. Look, I love him to death. I think he's one of the greatest presidents we've had in modern history. But Ronald Reagan made a tactical error in the 1986 Amnesty Act, because what he told the entire world that if you cross illegally, remain in our country long enough, eventually we're going to go ahead and give you a pass. And then they wonder why people continue to come. We can't do that, Don. So we have to not only secure our border, but take care and do our job to ensure those that are in the country illegally are removed. If we don't, they're going to keep coming, because they're going to think that they're going to be the next recipients of amnesty down the road. And here's the one last thing that I'll say too about what we need to do. And look, I was in the Oval Office. I'm not going to discuss things that that were spoke about there. I don't do tell all like a lot of people. But what I'm confident saying is President Trump understood the need to go after and defeat the cartels. Yeah. So we have to get a president back in the White House to understand that the strategy that we've used to go after the cartels for the last 3-4 decades has failed miserably. We have to change that. We have to go after them with the same level of tenacity, commitment, and government resources that we do terrorist organizations. Whether we call them a terrorist organization, there's pros and cons, but we know we need to go after them like we do terrorist organizations.
Well, I got news for you, buddy. Your book wouldn't sell because you'd never get someone to publish it other than perhaps myself, because the only books that seem to get picked up these days are the books that knock Trump, not the ones that are like, hey, Trump was right, and these are why it's obvious. But talk about that a little bit further, right? Like, my father came up with that policy. He did that, hey, we're going to treat him like an enemy combatant, right? And by the way, when you look at fentanyl, that in and of itself, being run across our borders, has caused more death to American citizens than the Afghan war, and all, that was a 20-year war for a long period of time, probably more than Vietnam. Right. It's like I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it feels like it's tens of thousands a year. So it's like, if Vietnam was 50-something thousand, let's call it a Vietnam every year or two. I mean, how can they not be enemy combatants? So Trump said this a while ago now, and then every other Republican, runs around with it like it's his own idea. How do you do that? I understand there are rules, unfortunately, that you got to play by, et cetera, et cetera. They'll be enforced differently and more drastically against a Republican, even if it's logical. How do you actually do that where you go after and attack the cartels using our military? Because again, I know it's controversial. It shouldn't be, because I can't think of a greater enemy combatant, than the cartels. But I'm a thinking man, and I'm not a Democrat. So
yeah, that's correct. So let me foot stomp a little bit. So the last 12-month period, we lost more Americans to drugs and fentanyl poisoning than all the Americans that died from all the terrorist attacks in our nation's history, the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined. Right? So put that in perspective.
It's a big one.
Right? So every single day, it's equivalent of a 747 fully loaded crash on the mountainside, killing every American on board. 9,000 Americans die every 30 days. So yeah, this is an issue. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Don. This one statistic alone, why in the hell our entire country is saying, we probably should stop fentanyl coming across our wide open south-north border. And who's doing that? The cartels. Here's how we do it. This is where, and I know you may not like me bringing up this name, but I understand it, but A.G. Barr, He did an op-ed and he went on a few talk shows. This is where I think he's right on this. And his philosophy is that we should try to implement a planned Colombia style, which meant that we worked with the Colombian government and the U.S. together worked with them to defeat the terrorists they had operated in their country, and it worked. So my first suggestion is let's do the same thing. Let's try to get Mexico on board to do a joint military effort to go after the cartels. Here's what we know. We know where the precursor criminal schools are coming from China. We know what ports of entry in Mexico they're going to. We know where all the Mexican meth labs and labs that are making synthetic drugs laced with fentanyl. We know all this, Don. So we know where to go. So we can use precision, surgical, kinetic operations to go after and defeat the cartels. And the last thing I'll say, it would be great if we would have Mexico's support and cooperation. If not, so what? The last time I checked, we don't need another country's permission to protect our own.
So, okay, that's fair. Now, listen, I'm happy giving someone credit where credit is due. If A.G. Barr is right about that, I think he's wrong about plenty of other things. I think he was weak, and I think he came in, and very much intentional. I think he came in actually probably with good intentions. But the second the left started talking about impeaching him, you saw a change in attitude. I saw that in my interactions with him. Just personally, just at social events at the White House, came in and gung-ho, and then it was like impeachment was like, he still wanted to be loved by those who hated him in Washington, D.C. For those guys, it's still, but that doesn't mean he's not right about this one. So, I don't like that sort of mentality where you change your worldview to accommodate those who hate you because it's just easier existence to be liked. We've chosen to do the opposite, which is why we fight. But again, I'm happy to say, hey, he's right about that. But when you talk about, the initiative in Colombia, I see the reports every day. It's like, the Mexican army was overrun by the cartels. I'm like, wait, or ex-police captain was on the payroll. They're all on the payroll. The military's on the payroll. The congressmen are on the payroll. This guy, with maybe one or two exceptions, someone's not on the payroll. It's just they haven't gotten to them yet, or they haven't threatened their families. Do you really think you actually get much done actually working with the Mexican government? Meaning, I'd love to. I understand there's decorum in this, but if they're overrun and or at duress because they know their family is going to be killed, that's a tough situation. But take out this guy. Here's Juan. He has a tiny fentanyl plant. He's going to make 3 plants. You go nuke him, but the real big guys, the real bad guys, as a very wise former president once would have called them, a very bad hombre. They're just left by the wayside, and they can go business as usual while they're throwing out sort of the cannon fodder.
Yeah. So look, there's 2 important things here. First of all, we have to acknowledge the United States that Mexico, they're no longer our partners. They haven't been our partners, and we have to stop pretending like they're our partners, Don. They're not. The second thing is, you're absolutely correct. Mexico, much of Mexico is a failed narco state for all the reasons you just enumerated. So at the end of the day, what we had maybe 20 years ago was a Mexican government that maybe didn't have the political will to do what they need to do. Now what we have is a Mexican government that not only doesn't have the political will, they don't have the capacity or capability now to defeat the cartels. They will never be able to defeat the cartels by themselves. It will take United States action to do that. And in my opinion, it's going to take surgical, precision, kinetic operations to do that. With or without Mexico, we need to do it if we're actually serious about protecting our own country and our own citizens.
Well, let's talk about protecting our own country and our own citizens, right? You're a former FBI agent, obviously your time at Border Patrol, and then a Marine veteran. I mean, talk about those things. I mean, do you have concerns about our state and federal law enforcement? Do you have concerns about the state of our military? You see the recruitment numbers, you see the policies. I'm sure when you were a Marine, they were pushing the trans ideology, and that makes us a stronger fighting force or something. It doesn't matter anymore. They say it. We're supposed to believe it's the gospel, but talk about that. I mean, you've sat in those 3 places. You functions at the highest level of bureaucracy, certainly in federal law enforcement. Do we have the will to change anything? Do we have the ability, or are these institutions at this point just too far gone because there's too many of the woke leaders in charge.
Well, I say that our will across all of those dimensions is being eroded right now and challenged. Yesterday, funny, ironically, you bring this up, I was reading an article about military recruitment, and that the United States Army, for example, last year they were, I believe it was under 150,000 or some number like that, and they're still woefully under the recruiting goals. And they talked about, they were at this recruiting event, and they had young, strapping men come up to them and asking them about a life in the military. And, their comment was, I don't think it's for me. And they asked him why. And he said, well, I don't want to go to war. And, I found that, I think, representational, Don, of where we're at now. Now, don't get me wrong. Nobody wants to go to war. When I was a Marine, I didn't want to go to war. But I knew that the only way to truly have peace was through strength. And for those people willing to be a part of something greater than themselves, to be a part of that strength apparatus. When I was a young man in the United States Marine Corps, when I was enlisted before I came commissioned, I remember going through bayonet drills, and we had pictures of communists, right, and Russians that we were going to attack and kill.
Yeah. Now we report to them. Yeah. Great. No, it's
and so I think we've lost that. I think we have. I'm worried. I am worried where the direction the military is going to go. But specifically, I spent 20 years in the FBI, Don, and I'm worried about the FBI. I still talk to current active agents. I talk to retired agents, and the FBI of today is not the FBI that was when I was in. Now, don't get me wrong. I still say the majority of the rank and file are still there for the right reasons and doing the right things, but not everybody. Remember, during the 2020 riots, FBI agents on active duty with ballistic vests on, with FBI across their chest, they were deployed there to protect the Lincoln Memorial. And what did they do? They knelt down in support of Black Lives Matter.
Was that on order? Like, because listen, it's actually a really good point. It's really interesting. It's actually contrary to most of what I've seen. But again, the FBI guys or former FBI guys that come up to me, they're probably home team, right? If they're not, whereas I really felt it was like, I always say, the door kickers. Listen, they're 90% on our side. But the problem is if you signal to leadership that you may be even a little bit on our side. If you're not, a trans activist at this point, you're going to be demoted. You're going to be guarding a pile of rubber dog shit in Guam. You're not going to be doing FBI work. So, how much of that is on order of leadership, or how much are we actually losing the rank and file? Because that's what's scary to me. Meaning, like I said, I feel like I see it so much. So many guys come up to me. They can't believe what's going on. They're so sorry, yada, yada, yada. And I understand that they're perhaps helpless right now to do something about it. But if some of those things aren't on order and they're just starting to do it, are they even weeding out the rank and file to fill that void with the other woke joke-like people that they have in there?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that event in 2020, when they were out in front of the Lincoln Memorial, now look, it wasn't an order from any supervision. The agents did that themselves, but that's almost to some degree, Don, worse, because when I was a rank and file agent, I would have never entered my mind. I can tell you your question. My honest response is like, I don't know who's on the team, because as an agent, it was irrelevant. I crossed the threshold of that door, and I put that badge on my chest and my gun in a holster. I didn't give a crap what their political affiliation was. We never talked about it. We never asked, because it didn't matter. But when I saw them kneel, oh, by the way, they're referred to as Kneel Team 6, by the way. You got to laugh at that, right?
I love that.
But that showed that they thought it was okay to do that. So that tells me that it's permeated well below the leadership for the reasons you said. A lot of people now are on the team, but they're going to be quiet, because if they aren't, they're not going to get promoted, as you said. But the fact it's gone down the rank and file to take actions like that, that's what scares me.
Yeah, I guess perhaps that's worse, right? That it wasn't an order, that it was just capitulation. Whether they believed it or not, that they'd be willing to do that, because that means like, hey, whether we like it or not, we'll violate your rights. We'll arrest your grandmother because she was 1,500 miles within the proximity of D.C. On January 6th, et cetera, et cetera. You as a concerned mother, you're a domestic terrorist because you went to a PTA meeting and spoke up about indoctrination. I mean, I guess that should scare all of us perhaps more than any of it.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree. And remember, when Comey was losing his mind, and I think Comey will go down as the worst director in the FBI's history. I was there at the time. I know him. I wasn't a fan of Comey when he was still the cool kid, right? But even then, during Comey, what I would have said is most of the travesty that was happening was really centralized at the top levels of the FBI. But as you said, through capitulation, as you articulated, that over the years has trickled down. And this is where, look, Director Wray, I'm torn with him because he's got an incredible background. I like the guy, but here's where he's made a mistake, is he's just buried his head and he's pretended to even acknowledge that there's a perception in this country right now that their trust in the FBI and DOJ has eroded. Whether you like that or not, whether you agree with that, whether you think that's factually accurate or not, as a leader of the FBI is irrelevant because that's the perception. And he's ignoring it. And then he's actually attacking the people that have that perception. Yeah. He's got it all wrong. And that's just further more erosion of the public trust in this FBI and Department of Justice.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, talk about the Comey thing, though, a little bit, because I agree with you. I mean, the guy's obviously an imbecile and incompetent, but I feel like he actually, you know, as far as the left is concerned, he's the greatest thing that happened. I mean, he could destroy that institution. He could do that, but, like, you know, he's getting, you know, $1 million things, and he's a commentator and book tours and this, that, and the other. Like, you know, yeah, he's a disaster if you're an agent and for the cause, or at least the former cause of the FBI, but in terms of what they look at it, I mean, he's the greatest thing that ever happened to them, and he's being rewarded as such. I mean, you know, that is a big distinction, right? He was a disaster, but the left wants him because he was able to take an institution, weaponize it against half the citizenry of the country, and he's being greatly rewarded for that. So, I agree with you that he's a disaster, but it doesn't seem like anyone on the left agrees with you because the ends justify the means.
Yep. And think about it. The irony there is unbelievable because remember, when they were investigating Hillary, they hated him. Remember that? And then it all changed. It all changed because I was in the FBI. It changed July 2016 when he just abdicated every norm, tradition, policy, when he circumvented the Attorney General of the United States as the FBI director and said, I'm going to take that authority away from the Attorney General of the United States of America, and I am going to make the prosecutorial decision to not prosecute Hillary Clinton, as he then proceeded to lay out a very detailed case as to why she should have been prosecuted. I tell you, Don, that was the moment in time where the trajectory of Comey changed, as well as the trajectory of the FBI changed, and it has continued to worsen since that time.
Well, no, I agree. It's crazy. So, I mean, we talked about the cartels and hitting them, you know, where they stand. What about deploying the military to the border just as a preventative thing? Is that, I mean, that doesn't seem like, you know, for those who are like, it's invasive, you can't go to war with another country, even if, you know, the Mexican government officials are on the, you know, cartel's payroll. You know, what about the military on the border? Can they be used to bolster? Could they work effectively with Border Patrol, et cetera, to stop the influx right now?
Yes, and they should be. Keep in mind, this is important. A lot of people don't realize is the United States military and other National Guard elements have been on our borders for years under multiple administrations, include President Obama and throughout President Trump's entire presidency. They are a very effective tool and resource down there to help Customs and Border Protection, specifically Border Patrol, as you said, to help do their job, and they have been. I mean, the assets from aviation assets to surveillance assets and capabilities to simply show a force. There's a tremendous amount of power that they can bring. What I would say, if I came back under the administration, the first thing that I would ask the president to do is dramatically increase the United States military's presence on our border. We cannot stop this unless we stop the bleeding. We have to send a strong, powerful message to Mexico, the cartels, and the entire world that our borders are actually secure, that if you come, you're not getting in. And but to be successful, it's going to take not only the resources, but the policies to back that up.
So one more thing, though. You know, we talked about the cartels, we talked about, you know, the governments, we talked about just the humanitarian crisis. But when you worked, you know, as an FBI special agent combating MS-13, gang violence, you know, how does the porous border affect the threats posed by those gangs? Are we just making their life easier? Are we enabling them to grow? What are the things that we aren't? Those are some of the obvious ones. But what are some of the things that we're not thinking about? Because those guys have been operating freely in our country in many respects, but it seems like we're literally like their MVP enabling that growth, which is again all over the country. That's not just in the border states.
D, all of the above. Again, it's not simple. Here's what the cartels do. They'll take zone B and they'll saturate zone B with illegal aliens as they watch from their listening posts, both in Mexico and the United States. Yes, in the United States, they have people listening posts and observation posts on mountaintops. They'll wait for the border patrol to respond to zone B to start processing those illegal aliens. And then that leaves zone A and C on either side wide open. And what happens? That's when they push the gotaways, which includes a hell of a lot of gang members. Right now, under this administration, we are providing MS-13 as well as a litany of gangs with a revolving door of new members. It's absolutely absurd, and it's detrimental to our nation's safety. And let's keep in mind, a lot of people forget about. So the drugs coming across. Well, how do they get to every town, city, and state? Because the gangs are the drug distribution arm of the cartels. So when you're opening our border, allowing gang members to come to the United States, you're actually supplying those gangs with more resources to help the cartels distribute the drugs coming across our border to every town, city, and state in this country. It's happening every day, all day long, Don.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember when I went down to the border, one of the times they were very concerned about where I stood because you talked about the listening posts of these gangs. They're like, hey, listen, we're worried that there's a sniper team on that mountain somewhere and they're going to shoot you in the face. I'm like, That's a great swing thought. I really look forward to going and giving a speech right now on a large podium and this and that and the other. I mean, this is a wonderful thought going through my head.
But it's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
No, and it's that
it's not
bad.
hyperbole.
But we know it. At the time, United States Secret Service knew it. I had a Secret Service detail and everything like that. But that the average American doesn't get that just emphasizes how much they're hiding from us. Again, it's why I was talking about sharing this kind of content. Make sure that people understand it. Because again, you think, okay, well, these things are problems, but you don't understand the size, the scope, the potential, how fast it could spiral out of control. And I think that's a huge part of it.
It is, and to your point, so let's go back to the migrants themselves. The past 32 months, because of this administration, they've encountered over 400,000 unaccompanied minors. 400,000. So the real common sense shocker to that is just think about how many more young children, minors, were sexually assaulted and raped on the journey up here. I'm sure you have. I've talked to countless Border Patrol agents and local law enforcement that recount how they interviewed a 14-year-old unaccompanied minor that was raped multiple times on her journey up here, or the 12-year-old's backpack that had the morning after pill in her backpack and asked why she had that. My mother gave it to me because she anticipated I would be raped on my journey up here. Or as I said, the 2,000 dead migrants that have been recovered at our border, or the numbers, untold numbers thrust into sex and labor trafficking. It was just a few months ago we found a 10-year-old that was working the midnight shift at a meatpacking plant cleaning up entrails, while we have a former HSS employee said that this administration has lost 85 to 100,000 of the 400 unaccompanied minors that they've allowed in the United States. But yet the mainstream media never talk about that, and most America doesn't realize that's happening.
Yeah, no, it's crazy when you just listen. The stats, these are governmental stats, right? 2/3 of all the women and kids, raped. I mean, you multiply that by 400,000. Like honestly, man, you'd think this would not be a partisan issue. You'd think that even Democrats, as fucked up as some of them are right now, and I get there's the Jeffrey Epstein Democrats and the Hollywood Democrats and probably the DC, but you would think that good, hardworking Democrats across the country would be like, you know what, we gotta all let our legislators know that this is where we draw the line. And the fact that hasn't happened, it's really sad, man. It's a shame.
But being to some degree, I'll give them some deference, just a little, and here's why. Because they're being lied to all day long, every day. The White House is using their bully pulpit, the White House press secretary. I mean, everything that comes out of her mouth about the border is just buffoonery, and it's just lie on top of lie. The mainstream media refuses to cover it truthfully and accurately, so they're not even getting the righteous information that they need.
Yeah. Well, guys, again, it's why we say it all the time. Make sure you're liking, make sure you're sharing, make sure you're subscribing. Follow Mark. Mark, thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for being able to, say these things and being willing to do it because, again, you know what? You're right. I think that's totally fair. People don't know. And if they don't know, it's harder to make a decision. So we do have to give them some of the benefit of the doubt. But now this information is out there. We just have to make sure that people actually see it, that people actually hear it. We got to force those who are suppressing it to be held accountable for that and or circumvent them entirely. And this is how we do it. So Mark, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for doing this. Keep up the good work. And I'm sure, unfortunately, we'll be talking in the not too distant future again as more of the disaster unfolds down there on the border. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, man. You're a great American.
Well, Don, thank you as well for what you do to get the truth and the facts out there. We got to keep fighting. And if I can, real quick, there's another great patriot that I know you know well, Tom Holman.
Oh, yeah.
We just started a new 501c3 nonprofit called Border 911. He's put together a hell of a team. He's got obviously himself and me and Jason Jones and Derek Maltz from the DEA and Sarah Carter and a few others that we're coming together. And our desire and our goal is to do just what you said, to continue to get the truth and facts out there. So if you can go to border911.com, check us out. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, guys. Tom's been on the show. Great dude. I'm glad you guys are doing that. We have talked about that. But yeah, guys, go check that one out as well. Go to the URL because I have a feeling that if you search it on Google, nothing's going to show up. No, but again, to my point, it's what we're up against, right? It's not like our ideas versus theirs. They got trillion-dollar institutions running cover for the Democrats, suppressing this stuff, trying to take over you'd think it'd be something we could all agree on, but you'd be wrong. So, guys, definitely go check that out. Mark, thanks for all the great work that you're doing. Okay, guys, thanks so much for that. Make sure you're liking, sharing, subscribing. Hit the little like button right now. It takes 2 seconds. I know how many people are watching, and I'm not seeing the likes there. So, other than the trolls who aren't going to do it, do that. That's how we're going to get this message out there. Also, be sure to check out the great folks and our sponsors over at Goldco. Go to donjuniorgold.com to learn more. They're going to walk you through the process step by step so you can take care of your financial security and protect yourselves from the insanity that we see every day. DONJRgold.com. Learn more, educate yourself. And guys, if you have a cell phone, have it with Patriot Mobile, America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. Again, these guys have guts to support a show like this. You've seen the cancellation, you've seen the consequences. This is the insanity that we're up against. These guys put back a portion of every dollar raised to fight for conservative values and the things we believe in. For free, fast activation, go to patriotmobile.com/triggered. That's patriotmobile.com/triggered. You can vote with your wallet, folks, or you can keep giving big corporate telecom your money to have them weaponize it against you and everything that you believe. patriotmobile.com/triggered. Guys, thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.